Salvete discipuli. In today's lesson, we pick up where we left off, with Quintus arriving at the palace the day after he saved King Cogidubnus from the she-bear. He will tell the king the story of his life from the time after the volcano up until the time when he arrives in Britannia. And in today's lesson, he begins by describing how he set Clemens free and how the two of them would eventually travel to Alexandria, Egypt. Quintus De Se. Quintus about himself. Postridie Quintus per hortum cum rege ambulabat. The next day, Quintus was walking through the garden with the king. This is a pretty straightforward sentence. We know all of this grammar. Again, always worth reviewing. Imperfect, was walking. Floresque varios spectabat. And he was looking at various flowers. Now, this sentence is worth stopping and noting. Que, we have seen this before. Que is another way to say and. But notice, even though the que is at the end of flores, the logic is that it's an and at the beginning of the sentence. And then flores is being described by the adjective varios. So don't let the fact that there's something between those two words, namely que, confuse you from understanding that flores, flowers, varios, varies, various flowers. Deinde rex, quomodo inquit ex urbe Pompeiis effugisti. Then the king, now literally, how, he said, did you escape out of the city of Pompeii? Inquit, which means he said, inquit always likes to come after the beginning of the quote, okay? So the quote begins with the word quomodo, how. In your English, you may very well want to just move the inquit to the front, okay? So rather than say, how he said, did you escape, you could say, he said, how did you escape out of the city of Pompeii? That would be a perfectly good thing to do. Paterne et mater superfuerunt. Did your father and mother survive? Now, the word your is understood. You don't have to use tuus, which would mean your, when the context makes it clear that he's talking to him and asking about your father and mother. This little thing here, look at this. When you put ne at the end of the first word of the sentence, ne turns it into a question, okay? So some questions are created with what we call an interrogative, like words like cur, why, quid, what, quomodo in the previous sentence, how, okay? But when you want to take just a statement and turn it into a question, okay, you could have said pater et mater superfuerunt, period. And that would have meant father and mother survived. But if you want to ask, did they survive? You just put, like I said, you put ne at the beginning, the first word of the sentence, you put ne at the end. Quintus tristis pereit pater inquit, mater quoque in urbe pereit. Quintus sad, and again, the same thing with this inquit. We can just move that. Quintus sad, said, or you could even change this to an adverb, sadly, okay? Quintus sadly said, my father perished. My mother also perished in the city. Now, we never had in our reading any actual depiction of Metella dying. This sentence is the only reference that will ever be made to the fact that she died. And so we can just assume that while Quintus and Metella were trying to escape the city that day, Metella somehow succumbed to the poisonous gases or something, or maybe because rocks were falling from heaven, who knows, she might have been killed by a rock. However it happened, Quintus is now alone in the world. Ego et unus servus perfuimus. I and one slave survived. Ex urbe vix effugimus. We barely escaped out of the city. Okay, so weeks is this adverb that means barely or hardly. Okay, so we barely escaped out of the city. Simulac tutti eramus, servum qui tam fortis et tam fidelis fuerat, liberavi. As soon as we were safe, the slave who had been so brave and so faithful, I set free. Okay, so we've got one thing here is we've got this clause, okay? As soon as we were safe. Simulac tutti eramus. The rest of the sentence is its own grammatical sentence. The main verb is last. Liberavi, I set free. The object of liberavi is this word servum, okay? This is why it is very important to read the entire sentence before you begin translating. You wouldn't want to try making servum your subject. First of all, you wouldn't because it's not nominative. It has to be the object. And so you read the whole thing. And then we've got this relative clause. The word tam just means like so in the sense of tam fortis, so brave, tam fidelis. And we have here a pluperfect verb, okay, who had been pluperfect. He's talking about Clemens, by the way. Omnes villas, quas pater in Campania possederat vendidi. All of the houses which my father had possessed in Campania, I sold. Okay, so omnes villas is accusative. It is the object of vendidi. So we could recast the sentence. We could make vendidi the first word we translated. I sold all the houses which my father had possessed in Campania. Again, pluperfect tense verb. And by the way, we are now to understand that Quintus, although he is about 17 years old and alone in the world, he's a multimillionaire. I mean, he is an extremely wealthy young man. Itam multam pecuniam comparavi. In this way, I gained a lot of money. The word ita is the word that means thus or in this way. Ita. Tum ex Italia discedere volui, quod tristissimus eram. Then I wanted to leave Italy because I was very sad. Okay, so we've talked about this before. The verb discedere means to leave, and in English, you leave and you just have an object, like I left the house, okay? But in Latin, discedere always takes the preposition out of, okay? So ex Italia. The reason it's ex is because Italia starts with a vowel, okay? If this preposition came before a word that starts with a consonant, it would have just been the letter E, okay, pronounced A. So like a villa, out of the house, ex Italia, out of Italy. Tristissimus, very sad. Tristis is sad. Tristissimus, very sad. Just every time he sees things, it's just reminding him of all he's lost. And so he's just decided he needs a change of pace. Ego igitur et libertus meus urbem Brundisium petivimus. Therefore I and my freedman headed for the city of Brundisium. Brundisium is on the eastern tip of like the little heel of the boot of Italy. It's the main port if you're leaving Italy to go anywhere in the direction of the east. Et navem conscendimus, and we boarded a boat. Primo ad Graeciam venimus, et in urbe Athenis habitabamus. At first, we came to Greece, and we were living in the city of Athens. Okay, so primo is just this adverb meaning like firstly or at first. Haec urbs erat pulcherrima, sed cives turbulenti. The city was very beautiful, but the citizens rowdy. Okay, so we have to understand the erat here as again governing the second clause. You could say this city was very beautiful, but the citizens were rowdy, okay, if you want to resupply that, okay? Now, we just had tristissimus. That's the regular, what we call superlative. The adjective pulchra has an irregular superlative. I mean, we would have expected something like pulchraissimos, but no, very beautiful is pulcherrima. Multi philosophi qui forum quotidie frequentabant. Now, the sentence isn't done, but let's translate what we have. Many philosophers who were frequenting the forum every day. Okay, so to frequent something means to go there a lot. You know, you could say like, I frequent that restaurant, meaning I go to that restaurant a lot. Controversias inter se habebant. Were having arguments among themselves. Controversia is a story we translated last year out of Book 1. Remember when Quintus and his friend Alexander were both given opposite sides of the debate on who's better, the Greeks or the Romans. Okay, so an argument here is not like two people losing their temper, it's two people arguing a point, and that's what the philosophers are doing. Post paucos menses alias urbes videre voluimus. After a few months, we wanted to see other cities. Okay, so again, irregular verb, we wanted, and then we have the infinitive, we wanted to see, and then the object of videre is alias urbes. Ad Aegyptum igitur navigavimus, et mox ad urbem Alexandriam advenimus. Therefore, we sailed to Egypt. Igitur means therefore. Igitur is always after the beginning of the sentence. Okay, so even though you might want to translate igitur first, you might want to translate it first as I have. In Latin, igitur cannot begin a sentence. So therefore we sailed, navigavimus, to Egypt. And soon we arrived at the city of Alexandria. Alexandria at this time was certainly the most cosmopolitan city in the entire world, okay? There were neighborhoods in it of all kinds of ethnicities from around the empire. There was a Greek neighborhood, there was a native Egyptian neighborhood, there was a whole neighborhood of Jewish people that lived in Alexandria. And in fact, Alexandria was one of the centers of Jewish scholarship in the ancient world.